23. Irrational preferences or how to pump money. What flavors do you have? Asks Lucinda, contemplating the homemade ice creams. Chocolate, cherry and coffee, comes the reply. Lucinda ponders for a moment or two, not exactly happy with a choice so limited. I'll have the coffee, she decides. The waiter takes her order, but as he turns to walk away, he remembers, we also have plum, peach and passion fruit. Splendid, says Lucinda. I'll go for the cherry. We all have preferences, often different preferences, and what we prefer depends on context, on the options available. Now, the Lucinda story generates a smile of bafflement. How can knowledge of the plum, peach and passion fruit options lead her preference to switch from coffee to cherry? That seems paradoxical. It does seem paradoxical, but we can tell a tale and the paradox vanishes. We hypothesize that Lucinda was initially unhappy with going for cherry, but only because it appeared to be the sole fruit flavor available. Maybe the ice cream maker lacks expertise in flavoring by fruit, she pondered. On learning the availability of other fruits, Lucinda gained confidence in the maker's fruity abilities. With such confidence, she could go for her top preference, namely, the cherry, but only when other fruits are available. Her preference for coffee gains top place, when only one fruit is available. Context affects her preference between coffee and cherry. With that background point to the fore, let us see if it helps with some preference paradoxes. First, I introduce transitivity. If I prefer apples to bananas and bananas to clementines, then I should surely prefer apples to clementines. That is, the preference relation is transitive. Many relations are transitive. If Maynard is taller than Naomi and Naomi is taller than Oscar, then Maynard is taller than Oscar. In contrast to such transitive relations, kiss is intransitive. If Maynard kisses Naomi and Naomi kisses Oscar, it does not follow that Maynard kisses Oscar, far from it. And although Maynard loves kissing Naomi and Naomi loves kissing Oscar, it does not follow that Maynard loves kissing Oscar. If you are rational, your preferences should be transitive, or so it appears. The classic preference paradox challenges the appearance. Suppose the following. I prefer opera going with Lucy to attending investment seminars alone, yet I prefer attending investment seminars alone to watching football with Sid. This makes perfectly good sense. I delight in opera and Lucy's company. In contrast, I dislike football and find Sid uneasy company. Rationality suggests that I should obviously prefer opera going with Lucy to football with Sid. But does it? Paradox arises because I may nonetheless prefer the Sid football option to Lucy opera, and that could be a rational preference. Yet how? Let us set out the question in abbreviated form. If I prefer Lucy opera to seminars and seminars to Sid football, can it be rational to prefer Sid football to Lucy opera? Circumstances can be described where the correct answer is yes, and hence where, it seems, preference is not transitive. Suppose that I strongly need to overcome a claim by Sid that I am elitist, and suppose that Sid knows the choice is between Lucy opera and football with him. If I choose the Lucy option, I shall be exposed to Sid's elitist charge. Hence, I choose the Sid option, even though I prefer opera with Lucy to seminars and seminars to football with Sid. Rational preferences, it appears, need not be transitive. Perhaps the paradox is no paradox at all. Perhaps preferences are no more transitive than likes, loves, and licks. The problem with acquiescing in that conclusion is the danger of bankruptcy. More accurately, if we have intransitive preferences, then money can, in theory, be pumped from us until it is all gone, with our gaining nothing in return. It cannot be rational to succumb to that. Here is the money pump at work. In summary, I prefer opera to seminars and seminars to football, yet, intransitively, I prefer football to opera. Attending opera, seminars and football costs money, and let us pretend the same cost. Suppose that I have a ticket for the football and you hold tickets for the seminar and opera. As I prefer seminars to football, I should surely trade my football ticket for your seminar ticket, and pay you something for that trade, say, £10, seminar attendance being more valuable to me than football. The trade completed, you have the £10 and the football ticket. You still have the opera ticket. I now have the seminar ticket. Here comes the next stage. I prefer opera to seminars, so I should be prepared to offer you the seminar ticket and, say, another £10, to secure the much preferred opera ticket. I do so. I now have the opera ticket, but am down by £20. You now have the football and seminar tickets and the £20. Here comes the final stage. Because of my preferences intransitivity, I yet prefer football to opera, so I should be prepared to trade my opera ticket and £10 for the football ticket that you accepted from me in the first place. The outcome is that I am back to square one, holding just the football ticket, but £30 down. That is not good. You are back with your seminar and opera tickets, and a £30 gain and no doubt a big beam. As you now have tickets that I prefer, you and I should commence trading all over again, with more money pumped from me until either the money runs out or I see sense, either ceasing to trade or dropping my intransitive preferences. The money pump demonstrates an irrationality in holding intransitive preferences, unless preferers enjoy loss-making. Of course, someone with intransitive preferences, but otherwise rational and resisting bankruptcy, should refuse to trade. Then, though, we must ask what justifies the refusal, for the preferences also provide good reasons to trade. Assuming that rationality does demand transitivity, we are cast back into the paradox of preference. Let us recall Lucinda and her ice cream preferences. We thought of Lucinda as irrational, switching from coffee to cherry, until we understood the relevance of background fruit flavors. In the Lucy-Sid tale, the background, once entered into the preferences, may save me from intransitivity and hence from pumping dangers. Once the preferences are spelled out in greater detail, arguably the puzzle evaporates. Here are the preferences. First, opera with Lucy, no elitism displayed to Sid. Second, seminars alone, no elitism displayed to Sid. But if they are unavailable, I may be driven to. Third, football with Sid, no elitism displayed to Sid. Worse options would be opera with Lucy, elitism displayed to Sid, and football with Sid yet somehow elitism still displayed. Whether I can secure my first preference depends on whether the choice on offer is between football with Sid and opera with Lucy. If that is the choice, and known by Sid, then I end up with my sad third preference, but that is better for me than declining Sid and appearing elitist, opera going with Lucy. In the above, we have tied rational preferences to transitivity. What is disturbing is that we hit a new puzzle, when combining individuals' rational preferences, even when individually transitive. Consider an example of voting preferences. Abe prefers tax reduction to increased overseas aid and prefers increased overseas aid to increased arts funding. Ben prefers increased overseas aid to increased arts funding and increased arts funding to tax reduction. Clem prefers increased arts funding to tax reduction and tax reduction to increased overseas aid. Counting up the preferences of our three voters, we see that tax reduction defeats increased overseas aid, 2-1. Increased overseas aid defeats increased arts funding also 2-1. So, given the need for transitivity, tax reduction should surely defeat increased arts funding 2-1, yet it is the reverse. Increased arts funding defeats tax reduction, 2-1. Paradoxically, even when members of a group are individually consistent in their preferences, there is no fair and rational means of combining the preferences to ensure no inconsistency can ever arise in the group's preferences as a whole. But should that be surprising? After all, even though separate groups of preferences of an individual may be consistent, there is no guarantee that the totality of that individual's preferences must be. An individual, a human being, typically has a chaotic medley of beliefs, aims and memories, yearnings, hopes and anxieties, some to the fore, others submerged. As is discussed further, When meeting Fox and Hedgehog, page 286, some people are keen to straighten their lives. All elements must cohere, while others live with the chaos. Some homes are tidy, everything being in its proper place. Others are stacked with papers, paintings, and panic. It may be difficult to choose between the two ways of living, but it is surely worth reflecting that order can be boring, whereas some degree of disorder, of chaos, can at least be fun. 24. Chicken. 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 Chicken is a game played by the rough and tough. Well, only the rough and tough can face playing this version. Our players are two macho young men, Angelo and Berto, motorcyclists, bare chests bedecked with gold chains, lovers of revs and raw, of leather, rubber and heat, men out to impress the chicks, men who cannot face losing face, mean macho men of mean machines. The game is simple. From opposite ends of a long straight road, they accelerate towards each other, chests puffed out with confidence and conceit, hair streaming in the wind. Helmets. Not for true macho men. They come at each other fast, driving along the central white line, getting closer and closer to a head-on crash. The one who veers away into the correct lane first, left, in Britain, is chicken, fear, or good sense, finally taking over. The worst games are those in which the chicken chickens out pretty early on, quite a few seconds before a possible crash. We shall ignore degrees of chicken-icity. The best outcome for Angelo is the one in which Berto veers away while he, Angelo, roars on, making Berto the chicken and Angelo the hero, receiving appropriate rewards from the chicks. The worst outcome for Angelo is that he chickens out, leaving Berto the road. The second best outcome, for both, is that they veer away at the same time into their respective lanes, just before it is too late. Some may argue this leaves them both chickens, but wiser counsel is that they both merit congratulations for their nerve, judgment and final good sense. The only remaining possible outcome is a stupendous crash, not exactly good for either but, in their macho world, not as bad as being the sole chicken. Apart from the risk of that stupendous crash, what is the problem? Rationality is, paradoxically, the answer. Yes, we are, counterintuitively it is true, making Angelo and Berto rational individuals, as far as that is possible for people who play this game. Angelo reasons, either Berto will chicken out or he won't. If I keep my nerve, he might well chicken out before me. If he does, I win. But suppose Berto is not chicken, then for me to chicken out would be the worst outcome for me. Remember, my machismo leads me to prefer a crash to such dishonor. So, whatever Berto ends up doing, I should hold my nerve, drive on, no veering. Berto reasons likewise. Reason tells both of them not to veer away, leading them to their worst but one alternative, and to the hospital, or the mortuary. There is a better option for both, to veer away just before crashing. Why not do that? Because if Angelo reckons that is what Berto will do, he may as well drive on and win. But Berto reasons likewise, if thinking that Angelo will veer away. What if they secretly promise each other that they will both veer just in time? If Angelo is sure Berto will keep his promise, why should Angelo keep his? Macho men are ashamed of chickening but not of lying. Of course, Angelo would be aware that Berto would also be thinking that he, Berto, need not keep his word. Once again, a crash looks inevitable, if the players are rational. Is it ever rational to cooperate? This is no silly game. Imagine, Andorra and Bermuda are nations at loggerheads in an arms race, in possession of the same conventional weaponry. Andorra wants to be militarily stronger than Bermuda. It plans to develop nuclear weapons. For Andorra, the best outcome is Andorra with such weapons and Bermuda without. That is the worst option for Bermuda. It wants just the reverse. The second best option for both is for neither to develop nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are costly and, if they both end up with them, nothing of value is achieved. Both having nuclear weapons is a worse option than neither having nuclear weapons. Cooperation is in their mutual interests. they should agree not to develop nuclear weapons. But why should either party honor such an agreement? From Andorra's perspective, if Bermuda sticks to the agreement, Andorra would be better off secretly breaking the agreement, developing nuclear weapons and achieving its desired superior position. And if Bermuda secretly does not stick to the agreement, then Andorra needs all the more to be breaking the agreement and going nuclear. These are examples of the prisoner's dilemma, so called because it is typically put forward in terms of two prisoners. We shall call them Al and Bell. Al and Bell are being interviewed separately by the police, who are seeking confessions to their joint crime. Al and Bell do not know what the other will say, yet each must decide whether to confess. If neither confesses, their sentence will be a couple of years in prison. If one confesses and the other stays silent, the confessor is released and the silent one will receive 10 years. If they both confess, they get 5 years each. Without trust, they will both confess and end up with 5 years each in prison. Just as, without trust, the motorcyclists end up crashing and the nations pointlessly developing nuclear weaponry. The dilemma is how to gain the mutual advantages of cooperating, if, as it seems, such cooperation involves the risk of the other party not cooperating. Is that risk a genuine risk? Reasoning through the alternatives leads us to do something that seems to be in our own best interests, whatever the other party does, yet it fails to give us the best result. These are theoretical examples, in which the players seek to be rational by way of seeking their individual best outcomes rather than the mutual best outcome. Yet explanations by way of such self-interested rationality, so simply applied, fail to account for much of our social behavior, even if self-interest remains at the core. We get to know people and learn how they react in a variety of circumstances. As a result, we often have reasons to think that others are trustworthy and likely to act cooperatively. Importantly, we are often aware that if we fail to cooperate or break our promise, it is less likely we shall receive cooperation from others when we need it. The likelihood of repeated prisoners' dilemmas gives a boost to our selecting the cooperative choice, the sensible second best choice, in the examples. Reasoning about repeated cases, however, does not provide a watertight solution to such dilemmas. Sometimes we know that no future cases will arise, and even when we know there will be an indeterminate number of future cases, we are still taking something of a risk in a decision to cooperate and trust the others involved. Many of us, though, do find ourselves taking cooperative risks. Doing even if it is irrational from the perspective of a single self-interested individual is often to our benefit, and it at least avoids the head-on crash towards which Angelo and Berto, the rational bikers, are heading.